Today, we are shaping change with Jonathan Ainsley. Hello, Jonathan.
Good morning, Ross. Good to be with you.
Thanks for being on the show today. How about you start by letting people know what you do and how you got to this point?
Well, my work through coaching, I'm a Gallup certified StrengthsFinder coach. And over the last 5 to 10 years, this focus on longevity has created a gravitational pull. So that's what's brought me to you today, is really the work that's been evolving around longevity, especially flourishing longevity, which is proving to be a fascinating conversation and focus that we're creating.
Now, I've been an advisor for more than 30 years, and I've certainly noticed that, especially in the last 10 years, we're really starting to see the conversation around retirement, or really even the perception of what this retirement is all about. It's changing. Can you tell us what's going on from your perspective?
Yeah, well, I think everyone can recognize that more and more people are living longer than expected. And essentially, we have this revolution in aging. And some of the data points, so for a 65-year-old couple today, there's a 50% chance that one spouse lives to 95. So that's 30 years ahead of them. And so we're being gifted these longer lifespans that, humans have never had before. But generally, our thinking is lagging. And I think with what we've been through over the last few years around the lockdowns, many have a sense there's an inkling that something is missing. And built into that, the advances in technology, medicine, and our own thinking around these lifespans, it's only going to increase over time. And it's easy to get fooled by the headlines. So you see about life expectancy, for instance, having been reduced by a couple of years. Yet on the other hand, you've got things like Dr. Michael Roizen out of the Cleveland Clinic in his book last year on the Great Age Reboot, suggesting that by 2030, 90 will be the new 40. Those in their 20s should be planning on living to at least 120. And the idea that the person who's going to live to 150 has already been born. So there's this shift occurring out there and really helping people change the way they're seeing. It's taking it from the subconscious and making it a more of a conscious conversation.
So there's certainly people that would be considered lagging on this, but really society lags in general. So once enough people start recognizing something, they start enacting change, they start modifying what they do, society could be viewed as lagging as well. What do you think are some of the core challenges in society that would hinder quick adoption of this mindset?
Well, I think it's the stereotypes. It's the preconceived notions that, most of us have had over what aging looks like. A friend of mine, her 7-year-old grandchild wrote something at school recently that, if she lives to 100, she'll be slow. So even a 7-year-old has this sort of notional idea of what 100 looks like. But the reality is different. And so when you look at the data points, going back to 10,000 BC, if you look at a life expectancy chart, it was only up until 1900, it flatlined below 50 and has been going parabolic ever since. So we have this shift that's occurring, yet within that, some of the data points which we've created through generating this work and this focus, we've created these workshops which are really transitioning the mindset towards a more flourishing longevity, but baked into that from a societal point of view. In the US, 12.4 years of chronic illness is the average. So how many people would sign up for 12.4 years of chronic illness if that's where they knew they're headed? 64 million retirees in the US, averaging 47 hours TV per week, and that's pre-lockdown. So there's this sort of mindlessness of what aging looks like and how people are living it. MIT Age Lab, they've come out with their research showing that there's an epidemic of boredom, isolation, and loneliness. So, again, just the mindset around what aging looks like and the stereotyping. And with that, you've then got the idea of the strain on resources. So looking forward, there was an article in USA Today a couple of years ago talking about how many more people, especially family members, are engaged in caregiving. And the idea was that it was a siren call. And so it's only going to get worse. But I looked at that and thought, well, okay, what is my responsibility, both to my adult children and to society in my own approach to aging? How could that be different? And that's really a lot of the work we've been doing is helping people look at what's ahead more as an opportunity, seeing aging more as an opportunity, and really sort of building out how to move beyond social security. These are other conversations. We see data points about retirement savings. But once you start helping change mindset shift, that's creating a new paradigm, in essence, of thinking, and creates a whole new world of opportunity, looking beyond the challenges that we're staring down right now.
Hearing the statistic of 12.4 years for a chronic illness, I almost stopped you in the middle of when you were speaking and said, wait a minute, you just said 12.4 years. That's an extended period of time, obviously. I've witnessed it with parents. I think a lot of people have seen that with their parents or with other family members. And I don't know if I've ever connected the dots, but I know I have conversations as a planner with clients, and we'll talk about planning till 100. Just because that's a data point that we use, and it's a round number. So we like that. And I often hear the comment of, I hope I don't live that long. I don't want to live to 100. That's a challenge for a lot of people.
Well, I would agree. And again, it's the perception. So when we look around us, my own personal experience, my grandmother spent 30 years promising me each year would be her last, because she had it in her mind she was too old and frail to go on, and made it to just shy of 101. So to what extent has 65 been this marker for the last, 60 to 100 years, and seen more as a finishing line rather than in many ways a starting line? So again, with more and more people living longer than they expected, you're beginning to see there's a lot of resources out there around gerontology and longevity itself. And some of the common denominators in our work, we pull out what we call the 4 pillars of flourishing longevity. But if you think baseball, and coming from a former Brit, not a game I'm overly familiar with, but the idea of running it out, first base. So no matter what happens, if you're headed for first base, you run it out. And the differentiator, therefore, of rather than this sort of time-filling process. And it's not that it's bad in what people are doing, but if you get a 60-year-old who's open to the possibility of 100, well, that's the same time span as 20 to 60. They get the opportunity to relive the whole of their adult life again. What could that look like when we change the conversation? And again, one of the data points is that people who are more intentional in their approach to aging, they keel over more quickly. The morbidity, that illness is reduced typically. I mean, there's no guarantees, and, I get that. But there's the opportunity, and you do see that people are able to change their outcomes. And what I mean by that, for instance, in the film Magic Pill, there's a lady in that who spends $1,000 a month on insulin. By making some small changes, by the end of the film, she's spending 0 on insulin. Another person's using their backup inhaler 3 times a day at the start of the film because of her anxiety. By the end of it, she hasn't used her inhaler in 3 months. So helping change these perceptions changes the outcomes. And that's the real opportunity here, Ross, around all of this work.
One of my prime objectives with financial planning or retirement planning is to help people worry less about what could go wrong and spend more time focusing on what they want to get right. Now, I know you have some research and you speak about how being intentional and living intentionally has such an impact on quality of life. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, very much so. I see the planning world as being core and essential. But you've essentially been trained around the technicals. The common denominator has been more towards the money and the financial side. And even with this sort of broadening of holistic, asking people about goals without this added point of reference. That's kind of what's been missing. People don't know what they don't know. So what we've been seeing through the work we've created and working by bringing in clients into essentially advisory panels, and we create these paradigm shifts. And it's fascinating. So for instance, in the Villages here in Florida, one of the top places for aging and retirement in the US, a client walked into this workshop that I facilitated 5 years ago now, and they looked at me and said, "Are you going to help us make more money?" And that's the conversation they've been conditioned to. And this is with a financial CFP, a certified financial planner. An hour later, he wrote, "This meeting made me more aware of my future. It's about the next 40 years, not all about the dollars." And it's creating that paradigm shift. Another participant wrote, "This focus group has been an eye-opening experience. It gives a whole different outlook on retirement." And so by creating this change, that opens up this opportunity to have a different conversation. And it's wonderful. I mean, it's so much fun because it changes people's focus on the fear and frailty. Not that planning for that isn't important. Of course it is. Not that finance isn't important. I see finance as the foundation upon which the 4 pillars of flourishing longevity reside. So by helping create a framework for the conversation to incorporate conversations around mindset, how a person is approaching their own aging, health, their approach to health, purpose or ikigai, having thriving, how are you nourishing your spirit? And then finally, the importance of community. Community is so important. And when you look at a societal level, all 4 of those pillars have been in decline over the last 40 years. So by changing the conversation, creating this paradigm shift, you're setting people on a different pathway and empowering the advisor to be that trusted advisor in a way they've not been before. It's taking the conversation to a whole new level, which ultimately the clients, per those comments, it's so much fun and gratifying to see these shifts occurring.
Well, I appreciate the work you're doing. I appreciate that you are helping people shift the way they think and shift the conversation and focus on the things that matter most to them. Thanks for being on the show today, Jonathan Ainsley. It's good to have you.
Thanks so much, Ross. Good to be with you.